The night air was unusually still, thick with an unsettling quiet that seemed to press against my skin the moment I stepped out of my car. The mall loomed ahead, massive and silent, its windows dark and lifeless. Normally, during the day, it was alive with energy, music, chatter, laughter, but now it was just a shadow of itself, a sleeping giant that seemed to watch me with unseen eyes. Even the parking lot, usually a sea of headlights and tires, was almost empty. Only a handful of cars were scattered around, their shadows stretching unnaturally under the dim glow of flickering lamps. I paused, my hand gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. Something didn't feel right, a gut instinct I could neither shake nor explain. The thought of turning back flitted through my mind, but I had committed to this job. A night shift as a security guard wasn't glamorous, but the pay was decent and I needed it. I shook off the uneasy feeling, trying to convince myself it was just first-day nerves. The automatic doors slid open with a mechanical groan as I approached the employee entrance. The cool, recycled air that hit me smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and something older, dustier, a smell that seemed to belong to the mall itself. The silence was oppressive. Not a single sound of life, not even the hum of an air conditioner, could be heard clearly. Mr. Hensley, the mall manager, was waiting for me just inside the door. Mid-50s, thin, with eyes that seemed too sharp for someone in his position, he gave me a small nod. "First night?" His voice was low, calm, but carried a weight that made me tense instantly. I nodded, trying to hide the quiver in my voice. "Yes, sir. I'm ready." He led me through the endless corridors, each turn more disorienting than the last. The mall during the day was familiar to me. I'd been here before, but now the place felt like a labyrinth. Fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted unnaturally across the walls. He spoke in low tones, explaining basic protocols, though I suspected he wasn't really looking at me. His gaze seemed fixed somewhere beyond, watching the walls, the floors, as if he could see something I couldn't. "Check cameras every 15 to 30 minutes, he instructed. "Keep your round steady, don't ignore anything. Escalators, play areas, things happen there sometimes." He paused, and the weight of his words hung in the air. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Kids, usually," he added finally, waving it off. "But you'll see." I nodded silently, not daring to ask what he meant. Finally, we arrived at the security office, a cramped room tucked in the back corner, screens flickering with grainy footage of empty halls. Chairs were pushed neatly under desks, papers stacked in precise piles, as if no human hand had disturbed them for weeks. The monitors showed every corner of the mall. Frozen escalators, darkened stores. A children's play area bathed in eerie emergency light. He handed me a standard instruction sheet. "Do your rounds. Nothing fancy. Just make sure everything's in order." Then he stopped, glanced at me, and his eyes narrowed slightly. "And remember, the escalators and play area. Pay attention. Rules exist for a reason." The weight of his words made my stomach tighten. Once he left, the silence of the mall seemed to press against the walls, thick and heavy. Alone, I stared at the monitors, flipping through the feeds. Every corner seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, every shadow a potential threat. A movement behind me made me jump. A janitor stood leaning against the wall, grinning. His uniform was dusty, faded, but his eyes carried a sharpness that made me uneasy. "Evening, new guy," he said lightly. "Didn't mean to startle you." I laughed nervously. "Yeah, that's me. Didn't expect anyone else here at this hour." He shrugged. "We keep one of us around at night. Make sure the mall's ready for the next day. Just follow the rules." His grin faded, replaced by a cold seriousness. "Rules aren't suggestions. Not here." He handed me a crumpled piece of paper. I unfolded it, expecting a joke. Instead, there was a list of rules. Absolute, unnerving. Rules for surviving the night. 1. Check the cameras every 15 to 30 minutes. Do not stare too long. 2. Never look directly at the mannequins after midnight. If they move, leave immediately. 3. If a mannequin seems to follow you, never look back. 4. Avoid restroom mirrors at all costs. 5. Do not listen to voices in abandoned stores. 6. If a child laughs in the play area, leave immediately. 7. If your watch shows an earlier time than your last check, return to the security office. 8. Lock the security office between 4 and 4:30 a.m. Do not open for anyone. Check the cameras. 9. If you hear someone crying in a dressing room, do not open the door. 10. If you hear an escalator running, do not investigate. Watch the camera. 11. Do not leave before your shift ends. His gaze lingered. Follow them. The last guy didn't survive the night, or at least didn't come back. I nodded, swallowing hard, pocketing the paper. My pulse raced. The mall, silent and massive, seemed to pulse around me, alive and waiting. I knew then that the night shift wouldn't just be about checking cameras. It would be a test of everything I knew about fear, awareness, and survival. I sat in front of the monitors, heart pounding. Every shadow, every flicker of light seemed to move independently. The mannequins in stores, the frozen escalators, the dark corridors, all of it felt alive. And I realized, as I stared into the endless screens, that I wasn't just observing the mall. The mall was observing me. The clock in the security office struck midnight, its mechanical tick echoing unnaturally through the small room. I gripped my flashlight and stepped out into the corridors, each step echoing off the polished tiles. The mall was no longer the familiar place I'd known during the day. It had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and silent threats. The flickering emergency lights cast long, twisting silhouettes along the walls, making the hallways feel impossibly longer, the corners impossible to predict. I started my patrol slowly, trying to force my mind to rationalize everything. Every sound was amplified, the hum of fluorescent lights, the distant creaks of the building settling, even my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Each corner I passed seemed to stretch endlessly, looping back on itself in ways that felt unnatural. The mannequins in the store windows, which had stood still earlier, now seemed to lean slightly, heads tilted as if following my every movement. My first stop was a clothing store near the center of the mall. I noticed immediately that its door was wide open, strange because the mall's policy required all stores to be locked after hours. I froze, shining my flashlight into the store. Racks of clothes swayed faintly, though the air was perfectly still. My breath hitched. Something stirred in the corner of my eye. I turned sharply. Nothing. Just the mannequins. I shook my head, telling myself it was nerves. And then I heard it. A soft rustling of fabric. Not the wind, not the floorboards, but deliberate, as if someone or something was moving just out of sight. One mannequin, which had been facing the wall, was now slightly angled toward the exit, its head now eerily pointing in my direction. I swallowed hard. Okay. That's enough, I muttered to myself, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. I called out, half hoping, half fearing an answer. "Mr. Janitor, you around?" The hallway remained empty. Only the soft shuffle of fabric behind me suggested I wasn't alone. Then I saw it. The mannequin from the store now stood directly in the middle of the hallway. Its head was fixed in my direction, eyes lifeless yet somehow accusatory. Its joints creaked as it shifted slightly forward, each movement stiff, jerky, unnatural. My heart hammering, I bolted, my footsteps echoing violently in the cavernous hallways. I didn't dare look back, though the feeling of being pursued pressed down on me with a weight I couldn't ignore. Rounding a corner, I stumbled into the restroom and slammed the door behind me, gasping for air. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to regain control, and that's when I noticed her, a woman standing near the stalls, dressed like a cleaning lady. She faced away from me. My eyes blinked once, twice, and she was gone. My stomach knotted as I remembered the rules. Rule 3. If a mannequin looks like it's following you, do not look back. Rule 4. Avoid looking into restroom mirrors. I had already broken 2 of the rules. Panic surged. There were more. Rule 5. If you hear someone talking in an abandoned store, do not listen. Rule 6. If you hear a child laughing in the play area, leave immediately. Rule 7. If you check the time and it's earlier than the last time, immediately return to the security office. Glancing at my watch, I froze. It read 11:30 p.m. That made no sense. My shift had just started barely minutes ago. Time seemed to have warped, distorted by the mall itself. I felt trapped in a space that was bending reality around me. I bolted toward the security office, desperate to find some safety. The doors slammed behind me with a force I hadn't applied. Lights flickered violently. The monitors showed nothing unusual, but the sensation of being watched, hunted, intensified. Then came the soft scraping of footsteps behind the office. Rough, uneven, deliberate. Rule 3 screamed in my mind. Don't look at the following mannequin. I forced myself to keep moving. The escalator hummed faintly, though it had been still before. My pulse spiked as my imagination raced. I obeyed Rule 10. Watch the cameras. Don't investigate. The screen showed a tall, spindly figure on the escalator, its face obscured, limbs jerky and mechanical. It seemed to stare straight into the lens. At me. Then the monitor flickered into static. A high-pitched buzzing filled the office, rattling my teeth. When I dared look again, the escalator was empty. My breaths came in sharp, ragged gasps. Every corridor I had just passed seemed to stretch infinitely, alive with shadow and movement. The mall wasn't just a building, it was a predator, and I was its prey. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost all meaning. I remained in the office, flashlight trembling, waiting, watching. Every whisper, every metallic creak, every flicker of light reminded me I was not alone. 9:35 p.m., 03/12/2025. Muasa Karim. The security office had become a fragile sanctuary, but the clock showed that I could no longer avoid the hallways. Every moment I stayed, the mall's presence pressed tighter against my senses, a living weight that seeped into my bones. I took a deep breath, flashlight in hand, and stepped back into the corridors, my footsteps echoing unnaturally in the emptiness. The play area loomed ahead like a monument to childhood twisted into something sinister. Its bright slides and colorful tunnels were muted under the emergency lights, casting eerie shadows that seemed to crawl across the walls. Toys were strewn across the floor as though abandoned hastily. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant mixed with something metallic, acrid, and alien, an odor that immediately set my nerves on edge. A faint sound caught my attention. High-pitched laughter, childlike, echoing across the play area. My stomach churned violently. I froze, remembering Rule 6. If you hear a child laughing in the play area, leave immediately. The laughter didn't come from anywhere specific. It moved, echoing from every corner, weaving in and out of the shadows. My flashlight beam danced across the slides, tunnels, and small mannequins dressed as children. One of the mannequins had shifted, now standing in the middle of the floor facing me. Its glassy eyes reflected the light, unnervingly human in their stillness. Every instinct screamed at me to turn and run, but I knew the rules. I moved cautiously, keeping the beam of my flashlight fixed on the floor in front of me, not daring to glance directly at anything that might move. The air grew colder with every step, sharp and biting, like the mall itself was breathing down my neck. As I passed the rows of empty stores adjacent to the play area, the escalators began to hum faintly, their movements slow, deliberate. One of them carried a tall, spindly figure, limbs stiff, face obscured, ascending silently. Its jerky, unnatural motions made my skin crawl. I obeyed Rule 10. I didn't investigate, only watched the camera feed. Every creak of the escalator amplified the tension. Every shadow along the corridor seemed to twist in anticipation of my next move. Then came the whispers, soft, unintelligible, coming from the abandoned stores. Rule 5 screamed in my head, "Do not listen." My curiosity burned, but fear forced me to move past, not daring to acknowledge them. Still, the murmurs seemed to cling to me, trailing along the hallway, unrelenting. I stumbled across more mannequins, each slightly different than before. Some had shifted toward me, some now leaned at impossible angles. One, which had been placed as a store display for weeks, now faced me directly, its head tilted as if watching. My flashlight flickered violently, making the shadows dance and distort, and I could feel the air thicken with an almost tangible tension. Time had become meaningless. My watch blinked forward and backward unpredictably. Minutes stretched and contracted. The mall had become a place where reality bent, a predator stalking silently, ready to punish the slightest mistake. I reached the central hall where the main escalators met the play area. The child mannequins now seemed alive, their glassy eyes tracking my every movement. I could hear faint creaks, the sound of small feet shuffling, yet the hall remained empty. Then, the high-pitched laughter returned, closer this time, sharper, teasing. I obeyed Rule 6 and moved as fast as I could, flashlight shaking, heart pounding violently. As I ran past abandoned kiosks and darkened corridors, I noticed the metallic groan of one of the escalators rising in volume. On the monitor, the spindly figure appeared again, standing perfectly still, but somehow I could feel its gaze piercing through the screen, directly into me. Static flickered. A high-pitched buzzing filled the office, rattling the windows in my teeth. Finally, I made it back to the office. Slamming the door, locking it, I sank into the chair, breathless, shaking uncontrollably. The mall was no longer a building. It was alive, a hunting entity that observed, twisted, and punished. Every sound, every flicker, every shadow reminded me I was its prey. Hours blurred. Every minute was a test, each second a challenge to my sanity. My mind was fraying, but the rules, the janitor's warnings, remained the only thing tethering me to survival. Hours had passed, yet the mall refused to let me feel safe. The security office, once a fragile sanctuary, now felt suffocating, a small island of light in an ocean of shadows. I knew I had to continue my patrol. Every hallway, every corner, every store had transformed into a living entity, stretching and twisting unnaturally. The tiles beneath my feet seemed to hum with anticipation, as if they knew my next step before I did. I stepped back into the corridors, flashlight in hand, each beam of light trembling along the walls. The mannequins that had previously shifted now appeared to move even more deliberately, their heads tilting, arms shifting subtly, faces blank yet accusatory. One in a jewelry store turned slightly to face me as I passed, its glass eyes reflecting the dim emergency lights. My stomach churned violently. Rule 3. Don't look at the following mannequins. I forced myself to obey, moving quickly, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The escalators ahead hummed low and menacing. One of them carried a tall, spindly figure with jerky, mechanical movements. Its face was obscured, but the gaze felt heavy, aware, almost sentient. I obeyed Rule 10, keeping my distance, watching through the monitors instead of approaching. The figure's movements were deliberate, unnervingly precise, each step echoing like a metallic drum in the empty hall. A distant murmur reached my ears, soft, unintelligible voices drifting from an abandoned store. Rule 5. Do not listen. I forced myself to move past without acknowledging the sound, though every instinct screamed otherwise. The whispers clung to me, twisting and warping, seeping into the air like smoke. The hallway itself seemed alive, elongating with every step. Corners stretched farther than they should, shadows twisted and formed shapes that vanished when I tried to focus on them. My flashlight flickered violently, threatening to go out at any moment. The mall had become a labyrinth designed to disorient, to trap, to terrify. I passed the play area again. Toys were scattered across the floor, slides leaning at unnatural angles. Child mannequins that had once stood in corners now blocked the hallways, eyes glinting, heads tilted as if mocking my fear. The high-pitched laughter returned, echoing from multiple directions, impossibly close and impossibly far at the same time. Panic surged through me. Rule 6. Leave immediately if a child laughs in the play area. I obeyed, sprinting past as quickly as I could. Footsteps echoed behind me, rough, scraping, uneven. Rule 3 screamed in my mind. Don't look back at the mannequins. I forced myself to keep moving, though every fiber of my being wanted to turn and see what followed. The escalators groaned, humming louder now, vibrating through the floor. The monitors showed the tall figure again, motionless, yet fully aware, staring directly into the lens, directly at me. Then static consumed the screen, and a high-pitched buzzing filled the office. I finally made it to the security office, slamming the door and locking it. My body trembled violently. The mall was no longer just a place. It was alive, predatory, and patient. Every shadow, every creak, every flicker reminded me I was being hunted. And then I remembered the janitor's warning. Follow the rules, or you'll end up like the last guy. My pulse raced. The words rang louder than any sound the mall had produced. Who had survived before? Who hadn't? I didn't want to find out. I sank into the chair, breathing heavily, flashlight still trembling in my hand. The mall seemed to pulse around me, alive, aware, waiting. I had survived, but only barely. The hallway horrors, the escalator figure, the child mannequins, the whispers. They had tested me, and I had barely made it through intact. Hours blurred, minutes lost meaning. The rules were my lifeline, yet each one I had broken brought me closer to the edge. I realized then that the mall had no tolerance for mistakes. Every shadow, every flicker, every creak was a punishment in itself. By the time I stepped out of the office again, the mall had fully transformed. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting along the walls, and every corridor seemed to ripple with unseen movement. The escalators ahead hummed ominously, a low vibration running through the tiles beneath my feet. My flashlight beam bounced along the hall, illuminating mannequins that had shifted subtly since my last patrol. Some leaning, others tilting at impossible angles, eyes fixed on me. I approached the main escalator cautiously. The soft hum grew louder, more deliberate, vibrating through the floor and echoing across the empty halls. On it stood a figure, tall, spindly, limbs stiff and jerky, face hidden in shadows. My pulse spiked. I obeyed Rule 10. Watch through the monitors. Do not investigate. The figure's head tilted unnaturally, its movements mechanical yet purposeful, as if aware of my gaze. Static flickered across the screen. A high-pitched buzzing filled the office, rattling my teeth and making the air thrum with tension. My flashlight shook violently in my hands, casting distorted shadows that seemed to move independently of the light. When the screen cleared, the escalator was empty. I forced myself to continue patrol, stepping into the hallways with caution. The play area came into view, and the child mannequins that had blocked my path earlier now appeared to lean toward me, eyes glinting under the dim emergency lights. High-pitched laughter echoed again, cruel and teasing. Panic surged through me, but I obeyed. Rule 6. I didn't linger, moving as fast as possible. Footsteps followed, rough, uneven, scraping against the tiles. Rule 3 screamed in my mind. Do not look back at the mannequins. I forced myself to keep moving, heart hammering violently, adrenaline burning through every vein. The escalators groaned louder, the hum now vibrating the walls themselves. Then came the whispering from abandoned stores. Rule 5, do not listen. The murmurs were soft but insistent, carrying unintelligible words that twisted and bent in the air. I forced myself to ignore them, my footsteps quickening. Shadows stretched along the corridors, twisting unnaturally, and the mall seemed to warp around me, halls elongating, corners bending, impossible angles forming at every turn. The escalator figure appeared again, visible now on the monitor as it stood perfectly still, limbs rigid, staring directly into the lens, at me. Its face remained hidden, but I felt its awareness, its sentience, every inch of me screaming that it could see beyond the screen. Static flickered violently, and the high-pitched buzzing returned, louder this time, rattling the walls in my teeth. I ran past abandoned kiosks, past the play area where the child mannequins now formed a grotesque line, their eyes reflecting every flicker of the flashlight. The laughter followed. Close now, almost tangible. I obeyed the rules, moving quickly, not looking, not listening, but the mall had other plans. Every shadow seemed to reach for me, every sound distorted, every corner warped into impossibility. Finally, I slammed the door of the security office and locked it. The monitors flickered violently. One camera captured the janitor, or something wearing his uniform, standing in the hallway, staring directly at me. His face twisted into an impossible grin, then wavered, dissolving like smoke. The clock struck 4:30 a.m., and silence returned. Morning light finally crept in. Mr. Hensley arrived at 6:01 a.m., calm, normal, human. Shift over. Then he said the words that froze me. There's no night janitor. No one works here at night except you. I handed in my keys, unable to speak. The warnings, the rules, the figures, the laughter, the mannequins. Who had been guiding me? Who had ensured I survived the night? Driving away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The mall loomed in the distance, silent, waiting for the next person foolish enough to step into its night. I realized the truth too late. Some doors should never be opened. Some buildings are alive in ways you cannot understand. And some nights never let you leave. The first rays of dawn filtered into the mall, but the shadows of the night refused to leave. I stepped cautiously from the security office, flashlight still in hand, every nerve on high alert. The mall now appeared normal, bright, bustling, alive with the morning shift, but the memory of the horrors from the night lingered, thick and suffocating. Every hallway, every escalator, every store, every play area, the mannequins, the whispers, the childlike laughter, the impossible shadows. All of it was etched into my mind. I knew it had been real. The mall wasn't just a building. It had been a predator, a living entity that tested my fear, my awareness, my sanity. I walked carefully through the central hall, watching as cleaners set up tables and children began to gather near the food court. The escalators were frozen, mannequins in place, everything seemingly normal, but I knew better. The mall's secrets were buried deep, only revealing themselves in the dead of night, in the silence when it was alive. Mr. Hensley arrived at 6:01 a.m., clipboard in hand, calm and composed. I approached him, desperate for answers. "There's no night janitor," he said matter-of-factly. "No one works here at night except you." My stomach twisted. The warnings, the rules, the janitor, the shifting mannequins, the escalator figure. Who had guided me through the night? Who had given me the rules? Who had ensured I survived? The questions gnawed at me, unanswerable, leaving only the lingering terror in my chest. I handed over my keys, shaking, my voice caught in my throat. I knew I would never return. That mall was no longer just a place. It was an entity, a predator lying in wait for the next unsuspecting soul. Driving away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The mall loomed silently, indifferent, yet somehow aware. I could feel it watching, waiting, patient, eternal. The road ahead was bright with the morning sun, but I knew the night's horrors would haunt me forever. I realized then that curiosity could be dangerous. Some doors, some buildings, some places should never be entered. The mall had eyes, and it never forgot. Its rules were absolute, and missteps were punished. I had survived, yes, but barely. If you ever find yourself in an empty, abandoned, or unusually quiet building, think twice before stepping inside. Some places are alive in ways you cannot understand. Pay attention to warnings, follow every rule, and never underestimate what might be watching. Remember, the night has eyes, and it never forgets.